All right, a couple things going on with the Jeep, but what I'm going to focus on right now is going to replace my sway bar quick disconnects. I've got some on here. Not a super fan of them. I mean, I guess they're okay. They don't, they're just kind of a pain in the butt to operate for whatever reason, and I don't like the fit and finish of them. So, reached out to Timiledge and got a set of their sway bar disconnects that I'm going to try out and see. So we'll get those unboxed and get this squared away, and then kind of explain to you, in case you don't know, what sway bar disconnects do and why they're important if you're going to trail ride and be off-road. All right, I'm going to try to mumble through this for you. So basically, this is your front sway bar right here, and it connects down to your axle. Now, I've already got the factory off, but what they do on the factory is there's a bolt on top here, and then it's bolted directly to this lip on the front of the axle. So what this does, this sway bar keeps the Jeep from rocking back and forth. In order to keep all the wheels on the ground, it keeps it on an even keel. When you go off-roading, with these being solid axle vehicles, you want a little bit of articulation. So you can have one wheel on the ground, the other one can be up on a rock or whatever, but you still got positive traction and you're going forward. That's where your bump stops and all that stuff come into play. But you want to undo those so that you get better tread on the ground when you're going through obstacles. So that's the main reason, okay? These don't come with like the new Wranglers where you can just push a button on the Rubicons and they automatically disconnect. That's not the case on these, okay? They come in with a solid shaft that you can't adjust. So basically on a quick disconnect, you just pull this pin and then you can unhook this, right? Which means this is no longer hooked to both axles. So then you can articulate your axle to go over obstacles. The reason that you have to have that is for normal street driving. You want to keep your sway bar hooked up when you're on the street. It will help you control the vehicle. It'll ride a little wishy-washy. It'll vibrate different over bumps. It'll be a little harder to control. So make sure if you do sway bar disconnects that you have them on for normal street driving. I'll see if I can find my original sway bar links that I took out, but they come at a factory set, and they're hooked to the top here and down at the bottom. There's a certain degree of an angle that you want to keep your sway bar to keep the best control of your vehicle for on-road. So if you put any type of lift on your vehicle, which I've got spacer puck on this, and I've got a 2.5-inch lift and a couple other things going on, you have to get a sway bar disconnect that's adjustable. Even if you're not going to disconnect it for off-roading, you still have to have one that can adjust so that you can increase it to accommodate for your height to keep your sway bar at the right degree angle. I'll Google that up. I don't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head. I mean, I should know because that's how I set mine, but I've slept since then. So I'm going to get these new ones out, get it squared away, and then another thing that I'm excited about is I've got these 3-inch pucks on the front up here on the coils. Nothing wrong with them; they're okay. But Timiledge also makes the adjustable coil over spacers, so I can adjust the height, the ride height, however I want, and it seems to be a little bit more stable than this puck that's not adjustable. Plus, if you can see, I don't have any bump stops on the bottom here. So these new adjustable coilovers do have bump stops. So it's kind of a no-brainer. That'll be a later video. But today we're just going to do this sway bar disconnect. So let me get these unboxed and show you what we got going on. All right, I don't know where mine are for the XJ, but this is an example of a factory sway bar link. This is off of JK that lifted, the Weiss that was lifted, and these are actually set up for a 4-inch lift. So these aren't even that actual factory sway bar link. They're about 4 inches higher or longer than what they originally came from the factory, but that's where it poses the problem. If you want to change tire height, change suspension height, whatever, with this being a solid bar, you can't do that. And you can see this thing gets bolted in, so there is no way to disconnect it. So if you're going to put sway bar disconnects on this, always get adjustable. That way it's a one-time buy. You don't have to keep switching it, so on and so forth. This one's set up a little bit different than the JK, or than the XJ. Mine will bolt from the top, whereas on the JK it goes in from the side, but it's the same concept. It's just a fixed platform, and it won't allow you to articulate. Now, opening up this from Timolich, comes with the instructions. Pretty simple. I mean, it's pretty straightforward application on to put these in. You may struggle a little bit getting the factory ones off, depending upon how gummed up or gross they are. But on these disconnects here, they do have the 2 grease points that are already fixed, which is a good point to keep them greased. They don't have to be super solid, super beefy, because they don't really serve a whole lot of purpose other than keeping the rod straight. And you're not going to get a whole lot of stress on that during normal driving. So that's fine. On looking at these, I mean, they look like they're going to work just fine. It does have the jam nut, so that when you adjust them to the height that you need, you tighten this down so it doesn't move, and it locks it in place. One thing I did notice on these is the bottom bushing grommet is a little bit thinner than some of the other ones. But again, that's kind of one of the reasons I don't like the ones that I have now. It's a thicker grommet, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to get hooked back on when you're on the trail, because the grommet is a little soft. So it kind of folds inside itself and becomes a kind of a pain in the butt. But as far as fit and finish, got all the parts, components to it. These are the brackets that will go on the top to hook it up. And we'll go through that process. Again, refer to your instructions, because I'm swapping out aftermarket for aftermarket. So the initial removal from the factory won't be on the video, but pretty simple to follow and figure out. All right, see if you see I got my sway bar quick disconnects off. Since I had this already, I went ahead and swapped it while I was there. So what you'll get is you'll have this little plastic bushing that you'll slide on the inside, and what that'll do is when you put your sway bar on here, it'll keep it from rubbing against the metal and tearing up the grommet. So that's what we've got there. Went ahead and put those in. You can see they both face inward on both sides, and this is what your sway bar will look like that you had to work with. So that's what I've got there. As far as the angle, I did look it up. Ideal for a XJ, which is the Jeep Cherokee from 84 to 01, is between 10 to 15 degrees. But basically whatever it's set at, as long as you're not having driving issues, you should be fine. But that's what we've got, and that's what that looks like at this point. Now, since I already had my angle set, and I had aftermarket sway bar quick disconnects on it already, which they've seen better days. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to kind of cheat. So I'm going to use the ones that I already had adjusted and adjust my new Timolich even to what they are. And then what you'll do is once you screw these out to get to the length that you want, this jam nut, you will screw down here to the thicker part, and that'll hold it in place and keep it from articulating. Small part is going to go on the top of the sway bar. Thick part is what will hook onto the pins here at the bottom. So it'll slide on like that. But I'll record that process, and then we'll go from there. You're going to have 2 bags of hardware. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to open it up. For right now, these 2 pieces set aside. We'll come back to those. Sorry. This bolt, this washer, and one of the nuts is going to go for the top. The longer bolt, the star washer, and the other lock nut sit aside because they're gonna go for the bottom. So for the top part of this, that's gonna be what you need. And I'll show you how that goes on. All right, one thing I want to point out, in adjusting the temmelage to the other brand that I have, you can see I got them the same length. Here's the difference. Look at the amount of thread that's out on this one compared to the amount of thread on this one, which means this one should be a little bit stronger, but we shall see. But so far, I'm liking the quality. All right, got them adjusted. I'm gonna tighten down the jam nuts, and then we'll start installing. All right, so got the bracket on. Again, the smaller bolt, washer on the bottom, goes through, lock nut on top, tighten it down, but you wanna keep this faced forward. All right, now that we got this positioned where we want it, it's a 17 millimeter nut on the back, and this is a 6 millimeter Allen wrench. So then what we're gonna do is this will slide in right through here. You will put a bolt with the star washer on it on one side, and then a lock nut on the opposite side. I like to keep mine pointed in, so that's what I'm gonna do. And then as far as orientation of your grease fittings, idea would be face towards the back, but then it makes it a pain in the butt to get to. So I'm gonna do mine front facing, but I'm just gonna leave the caps on after I grease them. All right, sorry about the light behind it, but so if you look, I stand corrected. I had to run it from the inside out because this bracket is threaded on one end. So you really can't get the lock nut on there, which is no big deal. That's the exact same setup as the other aftermarkets I just had on. Just make sure that you have the star washer on this side. It'll lock it in place, keep it out. As far as tight, you want it to where you can move it a little bit, but you don't want it super tight. And keep in mind, you still haven't greased it yet. All right, now that you got it on, put your little ring on, right? What I like to do is put a little bit of grease on this to make it slide on a little easier. Then you just simply adjust your, I lost on the camera. There we go. Then you simply just adjust it and it slides right on, and then you put your Carter pin in. And then there you got it. So it slides in. Then your little Carter pin here goes into the little hole in the bottom of this stud. Now with this being brand new, you may have to pry this back a little bit in order to get this to slide in here. But once it loosens up, it'll be fine. You are good to go. Then you're gonna grease your fittings and should be good to go. And then in a minute, I'll show you how it operates. All right, all greased up and ready to go. One thing I want to point out is these parts that I had you set aside. What those are is this screw will actually screw through this pin and into a mounting point onto your Jeep. That way when you disconnect your sway bars, you float them up, slide them onto here, and then you'll put your pin in here. My Jeep does not have a spot to where I can utilize these. So I usually just fold them up, zip tie them, or bungee strap them. But some Jeeps do have where you can set this up. And I'll show you real quick on the JKU that I have. So on the JKU, same concept, a little bit different setup, but same concept. But this pin would swing up and it hooks onto this bracket right here, and then the pin would go through it. So this bracket is the equivalent to the cone piece that I just showed you. I just don't have a good mounting place on the XJ, but TJ's wouldn't be an issue. If your JK has a factory skid plate, then it will screw into that. But again, I don't have that, and I will not utilize them. It's not a huge deal. right, so this was a horrible representation of what the sway bar disconnects do, but it's the only thing I had readily available for this video. But if you can look down here and see, the passenger side tire is up in the air and the driver side rear is up in the air. So you see I've got two different angles on my axles. That's because the sway bar disconnects are off. And by doing that, it still sits relatively level with this aspect. And you can see that the front tire's down, rear tire's up. That ensures that you get the maximum amount of tread on the trails when you're off-road. Without that, it would be leaned to one side and you would be on the side of the tires instead of the meat of the tires in contact. Again, this thing articulates quite a bit more, but I didn't have any bolters readily available. But the main thing I wanted to show you is how you can crisscross axles by disconnecting your sway bar. So if you look over here, the distance, roughly a foot. Over here, the distance is right there, as opposed to over here where it's up there. So far so good. We'll test them out, see how they do. Kind of excited to see what other products Timolich has, and hopefully keep this build going. I'll post a link down below in the description, and like and subscribe and stay tuned, and we'll keep going.